Well, I'm very privileged to be able to talk about Emory, who was a good friend. And I must say that I don't remember when I met Emory. And I don't know if some of you feel that way. It's as though I always knew him. But I think perhaps I've known him since we had an MSA meeting in Amherst, Massachusetts. But here is Emory over a period of time to 1973. We all know what he looked like a little bit later. But one of the interesting things is these were all on his computer. And most of the pictures that I'll show you today were actually on his computer at the time of his death. And he collected photographs that people sent from all over the world. And I should comment, too, that if you would like to read about Emory, because I'm not going to talk much about the obituary, there's one published in Mycologia, but also Pedro, Amy Rossman, Mary Palm, and I wrote one, and it's actually online. If you search mycology at LSU, and right on the front page, there's a picture of Emory that you can click on and get to the obituary. Now, Emory grew up in what we call the Middle West of the United States, Crawfordsville, Indiana. And I visited the town after he died. Amy and Gary Samuels and Mary Palm had gone to help clear out Emory's basement lab that I'll show you in a minute. But I went there later to try to sort through the papers and other materials that he had. And here is a power plant. It's probably been torn down by now, but this is where Emory's father worked. He had a sort of a laborer's job here. And so it was very different from the life that Emory later led. The town street there on the top right, you can see there's a white banner, and there's now a Mexican restaurant in town. But one of the things that Emory regretted was that there was not a good restaurant in town. And the museum shown below, the red brick building with the white part attached, this is a natural history museum, and this is where Emory left his microscopes so that the people there could use them. And then there's the main street, which is typical of a lot of Middle Western United States town. Now, Emory lived in Indiana all his life until he went off to the Army. And he was attached to this 9th Combat Camera Unit. And he started out near Hollywood, where he learned to use the cameras. And there you can see some pictures of his people in his unit. You can see Emory in his Army outfit. And to the right is a famous movie actress of the time, Rosalind Russell. And so he was pictured with her. And he had a lot of friends there in the place near Hollywood. It's a small town near Hollywood. And there were lots of pictures. You can actually find them online by searching the Combat Camera Unit. His name is misspelled with E-M-E-R-Y, and that was also the way it was in some of his Army orders that he had saved. And so here are things from his own computers. How many of you, anybody here in any of these pictures? Hold up your hands as I go through. But anyway, he had all these photos that people loved to take pictures with him, and then they sent them to him. There's Teresita, who's not with us. Anybody else? And here was at a Deep Haifa meeting. I'm not sure whether it's Baton Rouge or Tennessee. There he was at the 100th CBS anniversary. Here he is. I know Cleet's in the room. And this was in Oslo. And there's another one. We took lots of pictures of him at this 100th anniversary when the first time I came to Utrecht, I think. And then he was at MSA in Salt Lake City. There he is, a different version of the photograph that Pedro just saw winning his award. And then he is with a whole group of people. Was this after he won the award, or do you know when?
This was a surprise birthday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, his birthday was last week. He would have been 95. And there he is, lecturing Gary Samuels. This was one I actually took, but he had it on his computer. And here are more meetings, some with CBS personnel, and Mary Palm, who is a special friend. And there he is at a meeting at Penn State. That was sent by Scott. And here he is. He loved awards. And one of his early awards was actually given to him by the current king of Thailand. and full of flowers, and it was an honorary degree. And then we laughed about the 6-pound book that he produced when he was 89. And there were T-shirts made, and there's Kathy Aim wearing one that we sent to him. There at the top, there's more celebrating the big book. And John Taylor, do you remember your little jingle that you recited at the auction? You don't remember? We had an auction for Mycological Society, and Emory was there, and we auctioned a copy of the book. And there was actually a dancing girls, and John read a little poem he had written. Toward the last year of his life, a number of the mycologists at the University of Illinois went and visited with Emory, and it was something that he really cherished. At the right, lower right, you see him at an MSA meeting in Amherst, Massachusetts with Margaret Barr Bigelows. And she was a special friend. They had studied with the same major professor, but at different times. But they were close friends all of their adult lives. And he was extremely upset at the time of Margaret's death, as you might imagine. But as Emory outlasted many of his friends, including Clark Rogerson, they often went together to celebrate holidays at the Bigelows, Emory found new friends, and always younger friends, and he got along really well with young people. And as is written in your program, and as Pedro said, Emory loved mycologists, the people that study fungi. And so there he is at this hotel where he loved to stay. And the hotel has now been torn down, as has the power plant where his father worked. But the chef would cook special meals for him. And so it was a really favorite place that he went to. Now, this was taken at a time at the CBS centenary before, a couple of days before. I went with Emory to Mazda. He wanted to go to get some candy from a special candy store there. I wanted to go see where my father had been billeted during the war. And so here we were looking at all kinds of sweets. We later went down the street, though, and bought candy. Uh-oh. Now, it always struck me as very strange that a man who would have traveled all over the world, and this was his first trip, actually, out of the country, and it was on a ocean liner that had been made into a troop ship. And he crossed the equator, and he kept this little folder with some other special Army orders and materials that were in a little packet that we found. And so here is documentation that he crossed the equator, and it's signed by David Jones. And so after he retired several times, he actually worked for the Corps of the government, and then he worked on contracts at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where the Bigelows were. And then he finally retired from actually being paid and went to Indiana, back to Crawfordsville. And it always seems strange to me that a man who would have traveled all over and loved exotic foods and nice art, very cultured man, would go back to this place in the Middle West. But there were all sorts of mementos that he had in the house. Here are buttons that were from high school and college reunions, and some of these he had kept more than 20 years. And these were in his bedroom in a bowl on his dresser. And one of the reasons that he enjoyed living in Crawfordsville is that he had old friends there. Mary Lou Milkey, with the red circle around her, is someone that he started grade school with, and they remained friends through college, and the entire time he was away from Crawfordsville, and then he came back with them. And over on the right, you can see Emory with Mary Palm and Mary Lou Milkey's daughter. And then down below, this beautiful soprano who was a pride and joy of Emory's, who was the granddaughter of Mary Lou And so he was extremely fond of her. And Emory's living room had a piano in it, and on the piano desk was Bach at the time of his death. And Elizabeth, the opera singer, said that to say that Emory had a collection of music is misleading because he actually had an entire library. And she talked about 3-foot stacks of music that were beside the piano. He had lots of music. And here he had lots of books and music and CDs and DVDs. Here's a CD that's narrated by Dick Karp. It's a long poem by a New England poet. And here are a number of cookbooks that he had, many more than this. He had art from all over the world, primarily Asia, though. And most of all, he had a laboratory in his basement where he worked. And you can see that he had a number of slides on the left. He had a huge slide library. And on the top right, his autoclaves and microscopes and his incubators. And there he is. And he used his computer here and sent messages out to many of us all over the world. And in the last months of his life, Emory sat in a chair, and to the left center, he could see this desk. His bedroom was there next to the candy box, which contained books, by the way. And then to the right there, it was his kitchen. But you can see all of the carpets he had. He had rugs all over the house. And then to the right of his chair, there was a window, and every evening deer would come, and so he would wait to see the deer, sometimes drinking scotch. And after his death, he had 2 very devoted nieces. They were extremely happy to be able to find a tombstone with a microscope on it, and so they were very proud of this. I'm not sure what Emory would have thought, but anyway, here is the URL, but it's much easier just to search mycology at LSU and find Emory that way. So, just to remind us what we're here about, and Emory's early ideas about establishing telomorph-anamorph connections by culture, although Waymeyer did not think this was a worthwhile project. And here's Emory, and I'm sure he's reminding us we need to get to work. So, thank you.